they're not going to show up to assessment appointments when mum doesn't know where the next meal is coming from. So any good assessment is about the formulation beyond just the label. It's about helping that individual to understand themselves, and that somebody's bad day does not mean they're a bad person. A really people to separate the behavior from the person is a really good way to start that journey of accountability.
Together we build this welcoming space.
Welcome to another episode of Where the Conversation Meets Us. And today, the conversation meets us in the space of this phenomenal doctor. But me, I don't want to, talk too much because I know how to big up people. I want her to use her own mouth to tell you the kind of accolades that she's sitting on. When I say someone has accolades, but first of all, let me tell you, I met this lady not a couple of years ago, it's been a good number of years now, at their wedding. Remember when I said I used to be a wedding photographer? Yes, I photographed a wedding, and we have just kept on, being in contact and being in each other's lives, and she's been such a blessing. Even this afternoon that I'm here like this, she has fed me. I know I'm always talking about food, but when you go to people's homes, it's not everybody that feeds you. But she fed me, and the food was amazing. I even asked for a recipe. Anyway, without talking too much, please join me in welcoming Dr. Mo Ogunreku. Hi, Mo.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Did I do well in my mini intro? I know that you tell us yourself.
That's very gracious. That's very gracious.
But yeah, she's just an amazing doctor. So I haven't really told them everything that you do because I wanted to give you the opportunity to, by yourself, tell the listeners who you are, what you do, where they can find you, and stuff like that. So please, mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. So yes, my name is Mo Ogunreku. I am a HCPC registered and BPS chartered forensic psychologist, and the clinical director of Neuroconsultancy Limited. So I guess where you can find me, Neuroconsultancy on those handles, website and LinkedIn, Instagram. Those are the places where I deliver services, psychological services and products to individuals, corporates and communities.
And I will link all of those below because I don't want you guys to struggle to find that, because I think you would need to find her after this conversation. Thank you so much for agreeing to Where the Conversation Meets Us, and thank you for welcoming me into your space. It's a privilege to, on this podcast, people welcome you into their homes. It's not everyone that, wants you to come in their space, but when people welcome you in their home, you have to make sure that you show gratitude for it. And I'm very big on gratitude. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
The conversation today centers around behavior. And, when I reached out to her and she said, she would be happy to do this, I was like, yes, because I know that growing up, being a Nigerian, in our background, there's so many things that you do. And let me speak some Yoruba. Like, they will beat the life out of you because of certain things that you've done. And sometimes it's not your behavior, it's just the situation. I don't know how to explain it, but she would explain from a clinical, brilliant space, not from a layman's place. She'll tell you everything. So I don't want to waste too much time and waffle on. The first thing I'd like to say is that, when people say, when you hear the phrase, behavior is communication, what does that mean in real psychological terms from a professional standpoint?
I mean, that saying in itself, research tells us that, up to 75% of our communication is non-verbal. So in psychological terms, what that's essentially saying is that people are communicating with you, with us, with the world around them without necessarily using words. It means that whether it's a response or a reaction, the things that they are not saying can be equally as important as the things that they are saying. Even kind of my use of my hands to communicate with you and the people that are listening to and watching the podcast. It's part of me trying to sort of carry them along. It's something that it won't necessarily be that, I've said to myself, use your hands. It's just part of the way that I
Yes.
communicate.
Yes.
You know, how we do that, whether it's a folded arm and you closing yourself or trying to block yourself in, or you're opening your arms more to invite somebody into your space. It's all part of what the receiver is seeing and filtering and making sense of how is this person communicating with me.
So would you say every time that we come across someone and the way they, maybe the gesture is a, it's a, I don't know if the right word is to say, a byproduct of a way they communicate. So if someone, for instance, because you know how some people, they can't look you in the eye when they talk to you and things like that. Do you think that that is also maybe a form of communication? Like, I don't want to say things that I don't know. So
Yes, it is, but sometimes behavior can be conscious and sometimes it can be unconscious.
Yes.
So, for example, you might find an individual that is like, you know, a C-suite exec in a corporate organization. They're very confident in the way that they communicate. You'll get the firm handshake, you'll get the direct eye contact, you'll have the sort of assertiveness that comes with that. And that's something that, whereas that individual and that character might already have had some of that, but as they've worked up into that space, they know that that's something that that confidence needs to be exuded in the space that they are within that corporate setting. So that's something that they will have actively continued to work on, and so that might be part their personality, but also there is a conscious effort that comes with that in that kind of space. But then you have the unconscious behavior as well that people might not be, you know, aware of. That some people, the timidity that comes with, you know, not making eye contact. So somebody might be naturally shy, they might not be naturally conversant, and they might not even be aware that, you know, they don't make as much eye contact as like the other, you know, person. So it's all about, and that's why it's so, this topic is so important, because when we're not conscious of something, we can't change it. We can't reflect on why we're doing that. A really good example for me is when I think, you know, I tend to like flick my nails, and this wasn't something, I did not realize this was something I did until I met my husband 11 years ago. And when we started dating, he said to me, do you know that you've got this tell when you're deep in thought, or you're like, your fingers go, and I was just like, are you serious? Like, and I had to from him reflecting that to me, I had to consciously then catch myself doing it. And it's something that I became more and more. I haven't stopped, but at least I'm aware of it. It's something that, so it's something, it's almost like, even when I'm maybe stressed or really processing something, when I catch myself flicking my fingernails, I know that even if I haven't acknowledged that I'm stressed or deep in thought, that is a physiological thing that my body does subconsciously to let me know that I'm processing something.
So we've only been talking for what, maybe 5 minutes? And it feels like I've been here for like 2 hours, because I'm just being blessed by the things you're saying. And she's making me think about the things that I do unconsciously. And before we started recording, I was saying to her how I don't finish sometimes my sentences. So I'm consciously today going to try and finish sentences, not jump from one thing to another. I've had people tell me that I go from one topic to another, and if we've had that discussion, will probably come up later on as we go on. So in your 20 years of practice, how often have you seen behavior being misunderstood? That was a big sigh, like,
I guess for me, I do what I do because behavior typically does tend to be misunderstood. So whilst I work with the general public, a lot of my specialism is also with in the forensic world. So people that are known to the criminal justice system in the forensic mental health space. So they're under the Mental Health Act, or they're being cared for, but because there's been an offence or some offending attached to that. I think for me, a natural motivation and curiosity that got me into the field was because that question of why do people do what they do, and how can I be of support to them to help them. I get some insight into that, but collectively as a community, as a system, how can we support in helping them to make better changes? And that's why psychology is so important to a lot of fields actually, but more, even so, it's fundamental to the clinical space, the forensic space, in that just because an individual, okay, so you will get an individual, they've offended.
Yes.
That offence is the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more attached to that, and which is what we call a formulation. So we go through the process of assessing that individual, understanding them, understanding their developmental experiences, how they've journeyed to the point of that offending, and then we come up with a formulation. So we have some, psychometrics, and we have some statutory tools that we use, but we will also apply our clinical judgment as professionals, understanding the theory and the evidence that underpins behaviour, to create a formulation that helps us to understand how they got to where they got to, and then what can there be implemented to help them make the required changes. So I say all that to say behaviour can be misunderstood. However, I'm in the field that I'm in because I believe that in understanding behaviour is the best way to help individuals.
And before we go on to the next one, this is just, off the back of what you just said. From a cultural standpoint, being we're Nigerians and, Africans, not just Nigerians, do you think that a lot of behaviors have been misunderstood in like children and in families, and as a result of that, people have had the bad end of a situation because they're just misunderstood?
Yes, I think, it's really important to think about the cultural lens when we're thinking about behaviours. In the space that I work in, when we're working with individuals from different heritage, it's really important to think about what does that behaviour actually mean within their culture? What does that translate in comparison to if we just look at it through a westernized lens? So a really good example would be in a space where you have, working with individual patients that have mental health difficulties. We're quite, in our Nigerian culture, Afro-Caribbean culture, we're quite communicative with our hands. Our voices can be elevated. It's not because we're fighting, it's just, the excitement, the communication, and and in a setting where that is just looked at through the lens of the Western world, that could then be misconstrued as being disruptive. It can be, and it isn't uncommon that how individuals that look like us are, number one, they are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, in the clinical space, mental health, and then how they're understood, because they're not thinking about it from a cultural lens, is then they're misunderstood. They're not understood well in the things that they say or the things that they do. And equally with our community, the Afro-Caribbean community, I think we need to understand that some things are our parents, are those that came before us, they only gave what they knew, and what they knew was limited at that time. So yes, there are behaviors and certain things that maybe a child would have done growing up that they would have just sort of like, earlier on, I was talking to you about sort of community and neurodivergence and neurodiversity. For them, no awareness of what that is, how a child might be presenting, is just, you're being disruptive, and then that child is shut down, and there's no curiosity as to what might be going on for that child, or even sort of some of the trauma responses, for example, like bedwetting and things like that. It might not be that a child, no child wants to bed wet. There might be a developmental stage when it happens, but if you've got like an older child that is continuously bedwetting, there isn't a curiosity about what might be going on for them there. But there's like, a punishment that comes with that, as opposed to trying to understand, which then reinforces something negatively for that child. But the same is for adults as well. Some adults, how they navigate spaces in their, I know adults today that, they engage in therapeutic work with me, and to even start to unpack some of the conversations that they can have with their families and explain some things is difficult, because they've just grown up just, containing it. It's not something.
Very good segue to my next question, because I was going to ask you, what happens to a child who grows up in an environment where expressing emotion wasn't safe, or even how they feel? How does that child end up, what kind of adults does that child become?
So you can get like, I typically explain it as like, sort of one of the evidence-based theories that we use is thinking about internal family systems. And how I describe it is like you can have somebody that is a hedgehog, and how hedgehogs sort of like just curl up and put their spines up to protect themselves, or you can have somebody that is like a bull. They will just charge. So where in an environment where a child has grown up where they can't be expressive, they'll do one of two things. They'll either enforce that expression, which is the ball, the charging type approach. Like, I will assert myself. That's the adult they become, because if they felt really stifled as a child, as an adult, when they then have some autonomy, they will let you know how they feel when they feel it, and they don't care about you. That's how, that's one way of it manifesting. But another way is becoming a very, very timid individual, low self-esteem. I can't say what is in my mind because I'm afraid of the repercussions and the backlash of what might come.
Jeez, like, it's making me think about myself and my life and even my siblings. And, there's so many questions that I have for her, but I can't even ask her on camera because I'll be the same Yoruba, I'll be between a shiri of people. So I'm just going to ask her this questions out of camera, because there's so many things that I can recognize from what you're saying around, even my own growing up and my own life. I'm a very opinionated adult. I say my mind, I say things how I feel and stuff like that. But for some reason, as I'm getting older as well, I'm starting to think maybe I don't have to have an opinion on everything. And it's not because I'm afraid of people or anything. It's just sometimes I just feel like people can misunderstand you as being always cantankerous if you have an opinion on everything, or you need to. But it's just because I always feel like if I don't have my say, if something goes wrong on that situation, I can never say that, I can never blame anybody else, because I never give myself the opportunity to speak about something. So, there's so many questions I have in my head. But, how does the brain and the body adapt when words are not enough? That's another thing that I'd like to know.
So for me, one of the things that I talk about a lot in my practice is around nervous system regulation. And basically, how we function in terms of the fight, flight, freeze response to threats that we experience, essentially. The way that our brain and our bodies adapts to it is very much in terms of, if we're using that example again of the hedgehog or the ball, it's very much, you'll get the on edge, the anticipation of something. So you'll have somebody that is if somebody is very similar to a hedgehog in their approach, it's the anticipation of conflict but withdrawal. So they're constantly scanning for what are they going to say, why are they saying that to me, what are they going to say next to me, when are they going to come at me, so how quickly do I need to withdraw, how quickly do I need to pull back. And on the other side, if somebody's kind of taken a ball approach, in terms of the way that their brain is wired, the wiring of the brain is very much conflict expectant, but it's, how quickly can I get out there offensively to defend myself? How quickly can I, sort of protect my space, whether that's in like physical, I'm going to sort of sit up straight and really broaden my shoulders and make myself feel physically bigger, or whether that's in the words that I say to let them know, cross that line and I'm going to tell you about yourself, your grandma and your great grandma. So even though the responses from our brains and our even though the wiring and the way that our brains will scan it is very much looking for the conflict, it's also how we respond to it. So our brains and our bodies will be wired in a way that if you're trying to be conflict avoidant, then when we talk about cortisol and high levels of hormones that tell us whether we want to flee or not, for somebody that is conflict avoidant, it's very much flee, 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 flee. And even situations that might not be situations that might not even like bring conflict, they begin to see conflict in them, so they very much stay back, avoid. And conflict isn't a bad thing in itself, because part of what we're talking about, what's been modeled as children, if we haven't had healthy conflict resolution modeled to us, there's a discomfort that comes with, there is in my experience and in my line of work, I've seen people really struggle with being misaligned and being or disagreeing with somebody. And it's like, it's actually okay. It's how you can agree to disagree, but then you can also have a conversation about it. There isn't a need that you must be, aligned on every single thing. Even as spouses, you were not aligned, I'm not aligned with my spouse and everything, but what brings about the behavior is that it's really uncomfortable for people to just kind of sit with it and to be able to have a conversation and say, well, I don't agree with you, but I maybe can see it from your perspective. But the act of sitting and actually conversing, that discomfort, people can't tolerate it. And it's almost like one of the things that we need to help people to do is learn to tolerate that discomfort.
I keep doing This is because, like, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about even people in my family where conflict has become such a big major thing. Nobody wants to sit down and resolve situations. It's just always, something has gone wrong. Everyone is mad about it, and no one is talking for years, and nobody just wants to. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about perhaps growing up, no one has really been taught how to sit down and resolve conflicts. It's always been, we're fighting, and that's it, we're fighting. And it just makes me wonder, like, how do adults now that have already, they've already grown in this way, is it that sometimes some of them, their harmful behaviors or even protective mechanisms come from such backgrounds? Is that something that is possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our childhood experiences, research tells us that our childhood experiences does have an impact on who we become. That isn't an opinion. That's something that we know to be true. And absolutely, there are things that individuals as adults will do now that has been protective for them when they were younger. So if they had an opinion when they were younger that was shut down and they were told, keep your mouth shut, blah, 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 they learned to keep their mouth shut, and they've grown up not really then wanting to express that opinion anymore or say, I don't agree with you on that. Can we have a conversation about it? So for them, or worse, they get beaten for, expressing something. So for a child, thinking about a 13, 14-year-old, as they're growing up, they want to avert being beaten. So what are they going to do? They're going to keep their mouth shut and keep their opinions to themselves. Or, even thinking about what you said earlier on about sibling relationships, and the fact that within I think sibling positions can be a very important part in behaviors and how that's manifested as well. But when you think about siblings that maybe as they've grown up, they've never actually resolved in terms of talking it out, or you have the elder siblings that never acknowledges that they're wrong, that carries through into adulthood, and that relationship can translate into adulthood as well. Absolutely. But when they're an adult, those that were younger, they have a bit more autonomy now, because I'm actually a grown person. I'm an adult now. So rather than tolerate your rubbish, I'm just going to I'm going to shut you out, and that's it. Not because I'm no longer 7 years old and you can't just talk to me anyhow. So that certainly can be those behaviors that we see certainly can be protective, and it's learnt. It's been reinforced because that's what's worked. I don't think any adult has sort of grown up thinking, when I become an adult, I'm going to be super sensitive to the point that if I think that somebody's criticizing me, I'm going to attack them. But how they've had to sort of almost respond to things growing up, it's that behavior's been, if it's worked for them, they'll have done it again. We talk about positive reinforcement. They would have done it, and they'll carry that through into adulthood.
I know we're just, still a couple of, like, 20 minutes in or something, but thank you very much, because I'm just, I keep thinking about my life. I've never really sat down with someone that is with your level of, expertise and experience to have this kind of conversation. And I'm just hearing you speak, and I keep thinking about my family and the kind of dynamics that we have or we've had and how people have grown up now. And I'm seeing many of the things that you're describing, even in my family. I can see, and I'm talking about people that are like, in their 50s and 60s, and you're seeing this attitude and you're thinking, okay, well, is it too late to even fix it? But we'll come back to that. I just wanted to ask, is it sometimes, this kind of thing can go from maybe survival strategy to a maladaptive pattern?
Yeah, it can, and it does for some people. And when we're talking about something becoming maladaptive, we're talking about the fact that it then, it impacts on aspects of their lives in a
Yes.
very negative way. So one of my areas of specialism is working with individuals that perpetrate domestic violence, so intimate partner violence, and the things that you see in terms of some of the behaviours
Yes.
of the perpetrators. For the context of this, I'm going to talk about heterosexual relationships. So a man
And a woman.
harming a woman, adult victim. And so whilst there is context, like I said earlier on about assessing and formulating and understanding the behaviour, so really trying to understand what's behind the controlling and abusive behaviour. And when you start to unpick and look at some of their experiences and what they've learned, what's underpinned in terms of their beliefs, that's the beliefs and this is my entitlement because I'm in this relationship with you, I am entitled to XYZ. That belief underpins a maladaptive behavior, which is then I tell you when to go where, how to go where, and who to talk to, and basically run your life. So, and it's functional.
Yes.
When we talk about it becoming maladaptive, it can still be functional because it's serving a purpose, because it's reinforcing something, but it's impacting on them and also impacting on others negatively as well.
So is there, from your experience, are there like common behaviors that people judge harshly that usually have a deeper origin? If there's a couple of examples that you can give us.
So one of the ones that kind of, I guess, sticks to mind for me, and I'm really big on sort of challenging taboo subjects and stigma, particularly within the Afro-Caribbean community. A really big one is on suicidality and self-harm, and the lack of understanding as to what's underpinning that and what's that about. So typically, in my experience within our community, I've often heard it just kind of it's described as like attention seeking behavior, and that really is such a reductionist way to think about it. It really is so much more than that, what's going on for that individual, and that's one that I know that is kind of misunderstood and particularly misresponded to. So when somebody's saying, they have thoughts of harming themselves, or they've got a plan, or they've attempted to harm themselves, how people respond to that just reflects really deeply how little understanding they have of what's going on, in terms of what drives a person to the point of thinking that I'm better off not being here, and the kind of the profound hopelessness that comes with that, but also the internal struggle that comes with that. But a lot of the times it's about individuals that have thought about harming themselves or even have attempted to harm themselves, and it's an ongoing battle. And the behavior itself in terms of self-harm, suicidality, it really is it's a behavior of I want to be released of the pain that I'm carrying, and sometimes also I want to release others of the burden that I feel that I am. But if no one views it that way, their response is not going to be a compassionate one, and B, not going to be one of, well, how can I then help you to understand that you're not a burden, and that you leaving would be such a big gap in the world and that you need to be around.
God, because I know this in the last couple of years. It might have been happening for so long, and we just haven't heard about them because we didn't have social media the way we have social media now. And I know that in recent times we've heard a lot of people preferring not to be here, and I've seen so many stories, and you think, oh, this person was fine and nothing happened. So how can we, I know, this is not a diagnostic space, but we should just sharing, expertise and knowledge with us just as a guidance. How can we spot, if it's possible, because I'm digressing from the questions now, but how can we spot a seemingly healthy person? Well, not healthy is not the right word. Somebody who doesn't look like there's any stress or any trouble. Because I've found out, or not found out, I've heard that the people that look the most like there's nothing wrong in their life are the ones that end up, wanting to take their own life. So, is there a way that we can spot these things in people that are wearing a good mask that you don't even see?
To be honest, there's no one way.
Yeah.
What I would say is for us to be compassionate and to be curious. I think in the world that we live in today, it's so fast flowing that even when we send messages, it's "I hope you're okay" rather than "What's going on
Oh,
for you." So
yes.
just some little reframes of genuinely having space to hold for people would be a good way to go. And I think what you said also is really important, in that it's not just the people in our lives that are struggling that we should be checking in on. It's
Yes.
the people that they seem like they've got everything
Everything. Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Those are people that we want to be checking in on as well, and just holding space for them, and just rather than "I trust you're well," because that's not a
Yeah.
question actually.
It's just me telling you that, but
Yeah,
I believe you're well.
it's a statement, and
Yeah.
there isn't a follow up through, and there's no curiosity that comes with that. Is to sort of engage and hold. When I say hold space, I mean actually create time. Phone calls, there's a lot that can be missed via WhatsApp conversation and text
Yes.
messages versus even a 10-minute phone call with
Phone call.
somebody.
Yeah.
If we know them, you'll be like, something sounds a bit off, or
Yeah.
you don't sound yourself. What's going
Yes.
on there? So, and I know that we're all busy and our lives are super busy, but for me, I believe in going back to, and this is one of the benefits of our culture and our community being a collectivistic
Yes.
community. I believe in going back to that. I think, obviously, with a lot of us in the diaspora, we have to adapt to the Western way of the world, which is go, 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 the rat race, 9 to 5. And we miss all the things
We
that,
do. We
back
do.
home would ordinarily
Community, a village. Yeah.
absolutely, that is missing. And I think for us, going back to that in the small ways that we can, whether it's that we, set aside like 20 minutes on a Sunday evening that I'm going to call two people and just check in
Yes.
with them, how are they doing, those little small changes that we can implement to try and bring that community and build that village back around ourselves. Because what we'll find is when we do that for others, people start doing that for us as well. They'll
Yeah.
start checking in with us, not the "I hope you're well," kind of text messages or the WhatsApp. And I think it's important to say, because we've been so
Yeah.
used to the rat race, it's going to take effort
Yes.
to do
Yes.
it,
Yes.
but that shouldn't deter us, because it's important to sort of validate people. But also, it's a big deal for us. Like, there was a recent research that had shown, this is specific to women, that spending time together and speaking to each
Yes.
other extended their life
Yeah.
expectancy.
Yeah.
And it was by psychologists in, I think, one of the Russell Group universities. But you can imagine the power of that, in that women connecting extends life expectancy.
God, it's so profound everything that you're sharing, and I just want to say, if you're still here watching, I hope you are. Can I just ask you to press pause, pick up your phone, and call somebody that you haven't maybe spoken to in a while, you haven't checked in, only by text or by WhatsApp message. Just pick up the phone and call them. And not, "I trust you're okay." Just check in and ask a real question. How are you? Just checking on someone. And if you're still here, please like, subscribe, share. This conversation is amazing. Thank you, Dr. Mo. Like, this is so. I'm being super blessed, and there's so much I'm going to ask you after this, guaranteed, because there's so many things I need to unpack myself. So I just wanted to ask again. how do labels help? Like if you have had an assessment, if you've had a diagnostic label, how do they help, and how can they sometimes obscure someone's story?
So for me, from a professional perspective, diagnostic labels can help in terms of categorizing and understanding from evidence-based perspective of that's the behaviors of the symptomologies align with that and they meet the diagnostic threshold for that. What it can also do, and I think this is super important for our community, and I kind of within the context of like neurodiversity and having children, or even as an adult having yourself assessed, is the support that can come from that. You know, particularly for children, and your episode on EHCP was great. Being able to have that assessment and being able to have that label or that diagnostic label has attached to it certain support from the wider system that can benefit a child that has received a diagnosis. So that's one reason and one benefit of having a label. But for me, any good assessment is about the formulation beyond just the label. It's about helping that individual to understand themselves and helping them to understand the differences and how they can work with the way that whether it's their mind still, you know, functions, or whether it's their behaviors, how they can anticipate circumstances, situations that they might have behaved differently to in the past, and then practice, put strategies in place for how they might be able to do it, you know, better and differently in the future. And when I work with clients, I always talk about, you know, having a toolkit of strategies. So it isn't one tool for everything. It's about equipping and having that toolkit there, that in different situations and different circumstances you can use different strategies to help you along. So I would say is one of the benefits of having a diagnostic label. Absolutely, equally, diagnostic labels or any labels can hinder people. So in my line of work, again, I think about, you know, when somebody I read a report or I look on the database of something, and already you've got like we all have like a red exclamation mark next to somebody does not engage, or, you know, aggressive towards professionals. And when you think about, those are labels in themselves, and there's no context to that aggressive towards professionals. It could very well have been like a father who you told that their children was being taken away and they got quite emotional, but then that professional read it as a threat and then put that on the system. Our words are so powerful, and as professionals in our fields, we sit in such a place of privilege, and it's so important to understand that privilege and that power that we hold in terms of what we write and how we write about individuals, and even like down to how we communicate with them and about them. So whether it's a full-blown report, I'm going to disclose that report to that client. How will they feel reading how I've described them? Am I being compassionate? And, you know, I can explain their difficulties without absolutely slating the individual. And it's so important, and that's something that I work with professionals in, you know, whether it's the frontline practitioners in criminal justice settings or social care settings, to really understand the privilege and the power that we hold as professionals and the labels that are attached. Because when something is in black and white on record, it's so difficult to get rid of that. And we think about children as well in the education setting, our young black boys that are constantly being labelled as disruptive, behavioural difficulties, and there's zero context. You know, what is the behaviour? And then you'll hear the actual story from the young person's like, this boy hit me, so I pushed him back. Nobody writes that part. It's he's got behavioural difficulties, and because he's also already been in detention 3 times. So, you know, and that carries through, you know, from if you have a young boy in year 8, once a teacher that he's going to in year 9 sees that he's been disruptive, that teacher already has biases. and they don't think about how they then prompt a bit, responses from that young person. Our young girls, our young black girls that are adultified prematurely, it's assumed they're sexualized, and it's assumed that that they are older than they are, and it's all of those labels. And even in the way that we write about them, something down to if somebody has been, if a young person has been abused, how we label that rather than actually naming it as what it is so important. And it can hinder, and it can be detrimental. Those labels can be detrimental, and equally in terms of how we think about. So I'll use an example in the kind of forensic sector, in the forensic field, about when somebody has been written off as they'll never engage with like psychological work, and the bias that comes with that, or that person hates all psychologists, and then that's been assigned to me. You're like, I now have to go into their cell and convince them to work with me. But really trying to understand the context that comes with that is something that I typically tell individuals, that rather than just carry what is written, I want to get to know them. Like, yes, you've had, assessments done in the past, but this is an opportunity for me to actually know you, and for you to tell your story to me, Mo the psychologist, on this occasion, take this assessment as is now, rather than just carry through the legacy that can be horrific labels and descriptions. And like I said, labels don't have to always be diagnostics, just the way that we describe individuals. Sometimes it's just, how helpful is that to them in accessing support, and even in like outside of clinical settings. You think about like, XYZ says this person, that person is so pompous or something like that. There's a bias that comes with that. It's already attached, and somebody else that then comes across that person is expecting this pomp, and they will, whatever that person does, they are going to filter it as it being pompous, even if that person was not. That's such a Nigerian word, pompous.
The funny thing is that immediately I saw you talking about where you're coming from, because pompous is
like haughty, proud. I could tell my parents' words have seeped into me somehow.
Look, all of us. There's so many things I say now that I'm thinking, does it even mean anything? But wow, thank you so much. The thing is, like, there were certain questions I was going to ask you, but you so nicely went from one into another, into another, into another. Now that I don't even have to go back again, because it's just be beating the dead horse, because you already answered them so perfectly. Because I was going to ask you about the dangers of labels, things like aggressive, oh, this person is aggressive, person is, whatever. But you've just answered those nicely, and thank you so much. And again, I think one of the key things I picked from this part of the conversation that you just talked about is that we are so quick as people to judge others on the one incident that happened that we probably happen to be privy to. You don't know if they were just having a bad day. And I can remember saying one time that a bad day isn't a bad person. It doesn't make a bad person. But because you've experienced that bad day, you just look at that person and think they're probably always like that. No. People who have seen me when I'm angry. My grandma used to say, God rest her soul. She used to say that I get angry like someone that is out of hearing. She said, because like if you're speaking to someone that's out of hearing, they don't hear what you're saying. They're just acting based on what they see you doing. She said sometimes that's how I get angry. I get angry like I'm not hearing anyone. And if someone experienced me the first time in that kind of space when I'm angry about something, they're going to have a bias in their mind about, oh my God, when she gets angry. But it's not always like that. I don't get angry often. And I'm so quick to move on from matters as well. One of my friends always says that if somebody supports you in fighting somebody else, I'm sorry for the person, because you will make up with that person, and then the person that supported you, that bought the fight, will not be looking like a like a mumu. Mumu is like what's the word? Mumu is like another night.
Like a fool.
Like a fool.
Yeah, like a fool.
Looking like a fool. So yes, thank you so much. I want to go a bit into everyday life, and in intimate relationships, how does misinterpreting behavior create long-term damage? Hi, thank you for watching an episode of Where the Conversation Meets Us. If you're still here, please can I ask you to like, subscribe, and share with your family and friends. That is how you can support a small growing channel like mine. I appreciate you very much. And now back to the video you're watching. And I'll just add the other one. And why do people often react to behavior instead of getting curious about it?
In intimate relationships, lack of communication. I think, we talked earlier on about non-verbal communication being such a big part of communication in itself. And I think if we're in intimate relationships, if there's a position of I'm not going to try and understand what that person is saying to me is, then I will make up a million and one situations in my head as to why they've said it, rather than just say to them, what did you mean by what you said? And so that can build things like resentment. It can build things like discord. It will build, well, the friendship of the relationship itself will be fractured. So rather than you having two people walking side by side towards a common goal, now you've got people that are kind of walking side by side, but every now and again they're like, he's got it in for me. It's like, why, if that is your baseline and presumption of he's got it in for me or she's got it in for me or they had malicious intention, that naturally means that you're either going to be defensive in your response to it or reactive. And that's going to have a long-term damaging effect on the relationship. There is no way, that those individuals can be in accord in anything, pertaining to the relationship, whether it's finances, whether it's going to affect intimacy, sex. It's going to affect if they have children, how they raise children. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier on about, that discomfort of just having being able to sit with discomfort. And it's so important in intimate relationship that we learn to have that window of tolerance for discomfort, because if we all married ourselves, we can't even, we would even fight with ourselves. Internally there are times that I'm like, Mo, what's going on there? Fix up, girl. How much more somebody else that's come from a completely different background. So for me now, using myself as a personal example, I come from a home of there's just me and my sister, girls, and then my husband comes from a home of 6 boys. The communication, so I'll sit on the phone with my sister for like 2 hours, and then the next day I'm on the phone to her for like another 2 hours, and it's like, what are you guys talking about? Whereas, a 20-minute conversation with him and his brother, solid, they're good for like a month. I'm like, how does that work? And just kind of thinking about even those different things in terms of their experiences, gender, the narrative around gender and all of that has coming from that background. And if, as two people in an intimate relationship, we're not holding that in mind and we're not then communicating, because absolutely some of the ways in which I will communicate will be based on the filters that I've experienced growing up. Likewise for him. But then how do we acknowledge those and then create our own new thing, because we're not defined just solely by the experiences that we've come from. There was a second part to your question. I was asking about how
why do people often react to behavior instead of getting curious about it?
I think the reason that we react to behaviours are because I think it touches something in us, whether that is somebody pulling away or whether that's us feeling like they're coming at us. It's not so much a trigger, but there's something that it kind of touches and hooks on. And again, it's that discomfort, and as human beings, we love to fill gaps. We don't like uncertainty. We're creatures of kind of repetition and certainty. So if there's a gap, a really good experiment is, how our brain works. Like if you're reading something and there are gaps in it, sometimes your eye your brain will fill in the gaps naturally, even though there are gaps in those words. But because your brain is so used to what those words are, it's filled in that. And until you actually tell your eye that there's a letter missing in that word, we don't actually realize. So just to say how, like, as human beings, we're wired for certainty. So when we are on the receiving end of a behavior, curiosity means uncertainty. We don't like that as human beings. It's an again, going back to discomfort, it's an uncomfortable place to be in, not knowing. So rather than not know, which is I wonder why, which is the curiosity. That I wonder why is like, I actually don't know.
Why
but then
is this person acting this way? Why?
That doesn't sit well with us as human beings a lot of the time. So rather than do that, I'm going to fill in this gap and tell myself why they have done what they have done, which feels a lot more comfortable because that's certainty. I've messaged them, and 2 days later, even though it's blue ticked on WhatsApp, they've not replied me. They're giving me attitude, they might be going through stuff. Their phone might be broken.
You just don't know.
But that story that we give ourselves gives us certainty. The 1,000,001 hypotheses that we might create from being curious is not uncertain. It's not certain, and that's we don't like uncertainty as human beings.
Wow, I am actually checking myself as we speak. Like, in my mind, I'm checking like times when I've made assumptions, when I've thought about, this is why some people are doing what they're doing, and this is just me trying to fill a gap. I'm really, really, this conversation is really hitting home for me because I'm checking myself. I'm thinking about family. I'm thinking about growing up. I'm thinking about all of the aspects of my life where now the things you're saying is sort of like shedding some light into certain parts of it. And I just wonder, can someone understand the root of their behavior but still struggle to change it?
Yes, I think, absolutely. We can understand. We have to remember, when we're talking about as adults, these are behaviors that, like I said earlier on, they've been functional, they've worked for us. It's been reinforced. How we have responded and behaved has gotten us the result. Yes, there might be some collateral damage along the way, but we've had the end result that we desired. So it's been reinforced and we've carried on with it. So when you're now faced at, example, at the age of 45, you understand wherever it has stemmed from, that maybe some of the things that you've done, you can recall back to, maybe you listen to this podcast and you can recall back to interactions when you were younger, or it's starting to kind of bring up things about maybe you and your parental your relationship with your parents, or all of that. You can have insight into it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to change it immediately. What I think is great is, number one, a good starting place is the awareness, and then number two is the desire to change, and then number three being the attempts to change. And it isn't to say that number three is not instantaneous, and I think it's really important to hold on to that when something has become almost second nature to us, a behavior, to change it is hard. It's hard work. But if we're able and we're willing to go through that graft, then it will yield. But it doesn't mean that, giving up on the first revolving door. It means trying again. When you kind of think about us learning things as we were growing up, things that are like just normal to us now, like walking, that wasn't, if we had given up as toddlers or babies when we're trying to, we wouldn't be growing, full grown adults walking now, or even things like driving, things like riding a bike, things like swimming. So if you think
swimming, I'm just learning now.
Well done. So things like, if you just kind of first of all think about like the practical things that we do, that we actually had to learn. If we gave up at the first hurdle, we wouldn't be competent as we are now. So, and it's the same with behavior. I think when somebody recognizes something that it's impacting on them, that they don't want to behave in that way anymore. They don't want to respond, they don't want to react in that way. The insight that they have in actually acknowledging that is a great place to start, and then just kind of giving themselves some grace and some self-compassion, but working at it. Working at something, when you work at something, means effort. And just continuing to work at it. And that's where I say about having the toolkit, because it isn't just you're not going to take a spanner to a nail. You have to have different strategies in your toolkit to be able to use to help you to make those changes. So don't just go around with a hammer thinking that taking a hammer to every situation is the right way to go about it, but continue to, if the toolkit analogy doesn't work, think about adding bows strings to your bow, and just kind of knowing and preparing your mind that it's going to take work, but actually if you keep at it, you're worth investing in. If you think about it that way, you're worth investing in. Work hard for it and make those changes, and sometimes those changes might need to come with getting professional support and professional help. It isn't everything that we can do alone. Some people, when they want to engage in smoking cessation, they need to kind of get some support to do that, because they know that it's such a long grain thing in them now. Even the little rituals of rolling tobacco and things like that, that they just need some additional support with that. So with anything, if that's something that you think is necessary, then seek professional support to get, to help you with that. And sometimes it might be that you need to seek professional support to even get an understanding first, and that's okay. I think getting professional support is feeling a bit more normalized now. It was very, very stigmatized back in the day. But with it sort of becoming more normalized, not that should matter, but I think just being able to seek and make sure that you're getting the right help in the with the right regulated professionals is a good way to start. And like I say, if you think about it in I'm worth investing in, then that's the way to sort of view it.
The more we talk, I might keep thinking I need to see a therapist. Because child, like, I'm just thinking, my brain is working overtime. Like, I'm just thinking about where everything she's been talking about relates to me. And I can tell you that many of the things she's spoken about, I can recognize some of those traits in myself, and some of those things in like people that surround me. So I'm hoping that a lot of people take the time to listen to this episode in full, even if it means watching it half and half, but make sure you listen in full, because it will really, really bless you and the people around you, and even how you behave towards people and how you carry on in yourself. It will really be a blessing. I want us to talk about systems and power of safeguarding and stuff like that. Just a couple questions in that space. So, what does ethical, person-centered practice look like when resources are limited? Because I know that, sometimes is in local government and councils, like they don't have enough funds to make sure that there's a therapist or someone to speak to for everyone that needs it. So, in that space, when resources are limited, what can people do?
Yeah. So from the perspective of like a practitioner who has worked in local authority and know what you mean in terms of that, I think one of the things that we need to think about is, whilst we don't have control of the wider system, what we do have control over, and this is how I, used to support social workers, youth justice practitioners, is thinking about what is that one-to-one interaction that client then has with you. Like, so whilst you can't control how the school system is dealing with that, or whether they are getting the EHCP done straight away, or even we can't control things like the police following our young boys around and everything like that. But what we can influence is how we leave that client feeling when they interact with us, and how we help them make sense of what's going on, but also how we help the system make sense of that person's experience. So when you're talking about person-centered, it's really about putting the client at the heart of the work that we're doing. I've worked with families in the past whereby I need to sort of carry out a forensic risk assessment with a young person, but actually when you think about Maslow's hierarchy
Yes.
of needs and what the family needs. They need a bed.
Mm.
You know, they're not going to show up to assessment appointments when mum doesn't know where the next meal is
It's
coming
coming from.
from. So that's when you're thinking about person-centered and ethical practice.
Yes.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one that I always bang on about, because really you're thinking about what are the basic needs
Yes.
of human beings right now in the context of the people that we're working with. What is their highest context marker, and how can we help align that and alleviate some of that pressure for them to then engage helpfully with us? So systems work, I'm really big on it, because I don't believe that anyone exists in silo, particularly those that are
Yes.
open to services. It's like beyond just thinking about, KPIs and
Yes.
targets of the business, thinking on a very humanistic level. How is the work that I'm going to be doing with this family, this individual, this person going to add value to their life? And how is the work that I'm doing going to help the wider system, and the documentation of understanding this person? How is that going to add value to that as well?
Well, okay. So, again, I think what you're saying is that if people are open to receiving help, from your perspective, you would offer them, a human-centered, person-centered help, not just, what are we going to get out of it from a resource perspective. And I think that's sometimes people are afraid to go to, the systems because they feel like they don't have time for me. They're just going to fob me off or whatever. They just give me medications and ask me to go. They're not really going to listen. And I think sometimes the problem that we experience as a community as well, as Afro-Caribbean community, is like, oh yeah, they're going to label me crazy. I'm not going to go there. But it's not always the case. You can hear it from someone that's a professional. They look at you, they see you, they hear you. You just need to find the right people to talk to, and hopefully, at the end of this, you can share some websites that you can go to start a process of getting some help. Thank you so much. We're nearing the end now, but we still have a couple of points to touch on, and I really wanted to touch on accountability and redemption, because I know that as much as some people, it's not their fault. Maybe it's their growing up, the things that have happened. There are other people that are just cantankerous. I don't know if I'm using that word so much today, but they're just like trouble sometimes. So, if behavior is communication, does that reduce accountability?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. And that's a big part of what I do, holding people that have harmed
Yeah.
accountable,
Yeah.
whilst we understand why or what some of the contributing factors, risk and vulnerability are to how they have become
Yes.
the individual that they've become. We still hold them accountable. We still help them to understand. And part of that is the acknowledgement. Part of holding accountable is the acknowledgement of harm to others. We talk a lot about, in my line of work, we talk a lot about intent and impact. Your intention might not have been
Yes.
to hurt somebody, but if somebody has been hurt and you're then made aware of that. Accountability means acknowledging that you have harmed somebody
Yes.
in that way, and that's really important. And whether that's in the clinical space or the forensic space or even in everyday interaction, it's so important that when you said earlier on, that somebody's bad day does not mean they're a bad person. A really good way of how I've described my work to my daughter, who is 5, is that people have done bad things but they're not bad people.
Yes.
And so helping people to separate the behavior from the person is a really good way to start that journey of accountability. Is that I think a lot of the times people, they struggle in terms of being accountable, because there is a assumption that if they're apologizing for their being. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is the actions,
Yes.
the behaviors
Yes.
has harmed in XYZ way. You have been made aware of that, and taking accountability of that is of value, because actually it then not only does it is not only is it valuable to the individual that has been harmed, whether it's a off the cuff comment that somebody made in a everyday conversation, or when we're talking more deeper level in terms of a forensic setting, but then being receptive to that and taking accountability then opens the person that has done that up to thinking and reflecting about what they can do differently in the future. And that's so important, because it's two parts. It's a win-win, really. It's a win for the person that was impacted negatively, whether the intent was to harm or not, but also in taking accountability then means that there's a level of openness to reflection, introspection of what can I do differently. So we're not saying that you're bad by taking accountability. Is like, could you do something better?
This is a bit. I'm just curious now. Have you ever witnessed real change in behavior that has surprised you?
In 20 years of practice, yes. I guess I wouldn't even say surprise me. I think it's been more because I don't think I would do what I do if I didn't believe change was possible.
True.
So it's not so much surprise. I think it's been more the times when it has really impacted me is not just when I have observed the change myself, but then others in the life of the individual have fed that change back to me. So one really poignant time in my life that kind of marks for me, like I said, I work with individuals that perpetrate harm, and I was working with a Bangladeshi community, and after working with a man for 7 months addressing his behavior, his wife wrote me a letter to talk about how she feels like she's got her husband back and the impact that had made to her life and the life of her children. And even just kind of thinking back at it now, it's making me feel quite emotional, because for me, it wasn't just like I saw the change in terms of how our sessions progressed, but obviously to get that feedback from that context, from his spouse, was so powerful and so moving for me. And it just reinforced why I do the work that I do, because I genuinely believe that people do have the capacity to change. Yes, it might take some work. Like I said, it was 7 months worth of work there, but to hear that from his spouse, and to hear the impact that then made, his change then made on the life of his wife and his children, was amazing. And equally for like working with younger people, where I'm obviously even more super sort of optimistic and motivated in kind of helping them to make changes, for them to, I think working with young people is particularly interesting, because they can tell whether you're genuinely invested in them or you are just BSing them. They can smell it from a mile away. And when you get a young person genuinely reflect on, you're all right, miss, you're all right. It's a massive thing. Or for them to even say something like, somebody squared up to them and they could hear our conversation in their head, and they chose to walk away, or they chose from the things that we've talked about in the sessions that we've had to kind of change peer group, because they realized that the peer group that they had before was not leading them. Those kind of, to get those feedback loops is phenomenal, and it just kind of reinforces for me the work that I do. So not so much surprise, but it's always great to hear, sometimes when it's kind of just assessment work or court related work, I might not see the end or see the tail end but when it's kind of long-term therapeutic work, and I get that feedback back either from the client or from others that are working with the client in other settings or context, that's the value, and that's the fulfillment of the job for me.
So when you speak so calmly, and me, I feel like I'm shouting. In fact, since I've been talking, I've been trying to talk calmly because I want to match her energy. She's very calm, so yourself, and I can imagine if you're doing therapeutic work with me, your calmness rub off on me, and I'll somehow I'll calm down, because my natural thing is to, I speak loud voice, pitch, loud pitch and everything, but you're so calm. when you speak, I kept checking the bar on the microphone to make sure that, she's speaking loud enough, but she's so calm when she speaks. But it's been such a great conversation. But I wanted to ask a couple of like closing reflections. Many of the questions that I listed out for us to talk on, you just somehow just answer them before I even get to ask. So it's been amazing that I didn't even have to ask them, because it shows the level of your expertise, because you probably can just tell that, okay, this question will probably have this sort of follow up question. Then you answer it. You probably not doing it consciously, but because it's something that you've been doing for 2 decades. Kids that were born when you started doing this job are in university now. If it was in the days of my grandmother, they would be married with children. But yeah, so thank you so much, Dr. Mo.
Thank
So after
you.
20 years, what has behavior taught you about humanity?
That we all need one another.
We all need one another.
We need one another. For me, faith is a big part of my practice as well. And I don't, God, we weren't created to just exist as individuals just like that. Even kind of from a scriptural perspective, in terms of when we're described as the body of Christ, it means us, there's a coming together, we work together. And, when behavior is communicated, or we seek to understand certain behaviors, some oftentimes or certain times it's because there has been no, sometimes it's because there's something lacking.
Yes.
There's been no mirroring of what the right thing is, or sometimes it's almost a cry to, I want to be part of something,
Yes.
invite me to be part of something. So for me, it's like, it goes back to what I was saying about systems is such a big part, whether it's in actual clinical practice or in everyday life. We can't exist in silo. And it's such a big part of, that coming together. Because it's in the coming together, it's in the community. We can check each other without having to sort of shame each other. We can model things. We talk about vicarious learning, where we can see when somebody does something and they're positively reinforced. It isn't just through seeing and observing that our behavior can change, because we can see that something positive is being reinforced when somebody does that. And so that vicarious learning happens when we function as a community, as a village. And the community doesn't have to be huge. I'm not saying that,
50
somebody
people,
needs to have 50 people in there, but just having those people that create that safe containment space that can hold us accountable, can model something else, can say, I need to call you up on this, but I'm calling you up on it from a place of love, not from a place of shame or anything like that, is so important. And when I think about as many individuals or families that I've worked with where there's been something lacking, it's been, the behavior has been negatively modeled, or there hasn't been anything. So something has just filled the space. Nature abhors a vacuum. Something will get filled.
This last two questions are just really, how people can do better for the people that are around them who might be having behavioral challenges, or what you deem as a behavioral challenge. What do we miss out the most on when we stop paying attention or stop listening to what people are trying to tell us through their behavior? What is the risk in that?
That we miss out on helping them. That's a huge one, because they might. So a really good example is those that I work with, when they say things like, I don't even care, particularly young people, that I don't even care tells me so much, that they are so invested in that thing that they're telling me that they do not care about. So I need to hear what's beyond that. I don't even care. And so when we miss out on things like that, we miss out on the opportunity to show love. We miss out on the opportunity to show compassion. We miss out on the opportunity to help somebody that might really, really be in need of help. And we miss out on the opportunity, I guess, also for there's something because we are designed to kind of function together, there is something about our sort of emotional capacity not being effectively used as well, when we're not able to, when we're missing out on this, our kind of emotional development, our intuition, if we're not seeing and hearing beyond just what is. If you think about behavior as like, you know, a tip of the iceberg, and when we're lacking the curiosity to understand what's going on beyond, then we're not fine-tuning our skills as well, and our emotional intelligence, you know, in just kind of, oh, that seemed a bit off, or, you know, I think it's really important for us sometimes to be, you know, we are intuitive beings, and some of us, we have learned to shut it down with a, you know, so quickly. And actually, if we follow through on that of or even, why am I feeling why I'm feeling, what has that, you know, done? And we, you know, we've talked a lot about others, but even in terms of missing our own behaviors, it's like, I'm so big on reflection of self. I'm just sitting with it, like, why did I flare up when that person said that about me? Why is it that when they said that, I was okay, but when they said that, I wasn't? What's that about? What did it touch internally for me, and why was that such a big deal? So both in terms of what we observe with others, but also within ourselves.
I'm smiling because my next question, which was supposed to be the closing one, was supposed to be, there's something you can give to the audience for them to take away for themselves. Like, if there's something they need to, what would it be? And you've just literally. But is there any closing remark, anything you'd like to say to the listeners that they can do to help themselves, help people around them? And then, finally, where can they find you? And if you have a private practice that is not part of your, you know,
Work.
work, if there's a private practice, can they reach out to you, and where? All of those I would link, by the way, but I just want you guys to hear from her.
Yes, I think it's important. One of the watchwords that we've said today has been about curiosity, for us to be curious, but also to be compassionate. Compassion to self, compassion to others, is really important in terms of just trying to understand and asking questions. We can be curious and not ask questions, but we should be curious and ask questions in a compassionate way, and just try to understand what's going on is super important. And I think that would be like my key take home message for anyone that has that's listening to this, in terms of in terms of what to take away from it. Yes, I do have an independent practice, and that is Nuru Consultancy. So you can find me on Instagram, and Nuru Consultancy is also on LinkedIn. We also have a website, www.nuruconsultancy.com.
That's it. Remember that thing in Nigeria? www. That's it. There was something I was training sometime. Well, thank you. Before I, go and start laughing now.
I've got something for you.
Oh, it's a day of exchanging gifts.
So
I've got something for you.
You cannot come to Nuru Consultancy and not receive a well-being package.
Oh my goodness!
So
thank
you for having me
so much. Woo! Oh wow! Oh wow! Oh wow! I'm not sharing with you guys. Sorry, I'm not sharing you. But thank you so much.
You.
First of all, you welcome me to your home. You spent over an hour having this conversation. You fed me like, oh my goodness! Thank you so much.
You're
it's such
welcome.
a privilege to know Dr. Mo. I'm gonna tell you, the family, her husband, amazing. But I also brought you something.
Oh.
Mine is not as amazing as yours. It's just a little thing to say.
Oh.
Thank you for coming on Where the Conversation Meets. Well, coming on, but let's meet in your home as well. It's just a little thing.
Thank you. I saw someone else with this on another episode. I got one. Woo woo.
Everyone gets one.
Yay! Thank you so much. This is lovely.
When the episode finally drops in a couple of weeks, and you're sitting down to listen back to yourself, then please make a cup of tea.
Thank
and
you.
Just Where the Conversation Meets us.
Thank you.
But it's been such an amazing episode, and I'm not saying this because she's here. This what we've just had now is what people pay for, and she's just giving this to us so willingly and so freely. So thank you so much. It's been such a privilege. Who knows? Maybe in the next year I'll be back again because by then this podcast would have, they say in Nigeria, blown.
Amen.
And then we'll be back again to talk about this. And I just have a few points of myself to kind of like close up on. Is maybe the question, sometimes is not what is wrong with them. Maybe it's what has happened to them. And maybe what has happened to them still speaks. And this is why people behave in certain ways that they do. So thank you so much for joining us on Where the Conversation Meets Us. Until next time, take care. Have a good day, night, evening, wherever you are. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.